Okay, are you ready? Let's get ready here for Don't Give Me Butterflies. Page 165. Cat, he said, it's not a big deal. The date is just a business thing. She glanced up. All systems in order. She totally knew how to play this off. How many times in her life had she pretended things didn't faze her? About a jillion. This was nothing. Oh, I don't care. That's totally your business. It is, he said, about my business. Okay, fine. Even if it was a business date, it was probably best to clear the air between them. But look, you're free and I'm free. Let's just keep it that way, okay? Let's not make that, she waved in a direction of the field, a thing. His expression was unreadable. What I'm trying to say is you don't have to make excuses to me. We're both adults, she said with a laugh. It was a good laugh. It sounded completely genuine. Extra points for her. She busied herself eating the casserole. If she was eating a little faster than necessary, well, it was because she was hungry, not because she was trying to get the hell out of there as fast as possible. This is so good. Did you have a lot of this when you were a kid? Something shifted in his expression. No. Then what? Frozen waffles? She spooned in another mouthful of the cheesy potato goodness. He rubbed a spot on the formica tabletop. I ate a lot of cereal when I was a kid. Your parents didn't like to cook? 166. They were very, he paused, through a searching for the right word, busy. I was more of a free-range kid. They weren't very interested in mundane household stuff. That explained a lot. No wonder the house was in such disrepair. What did they do? Jordan shrugged. Whatever they were into at the time. They weren't big on conforming to societal norms. Kat tilted her head. What do you mean? He'd chew a bit of the casserole, chewed, swallowed. His expression was shuttered and difficult to read. She recognized it. She slammed those same shutters on her own emotions all the time. They used to call themselves free spirits. Kat said slowly, free spirits as in they couldn't be bothered with trivial things like caring for a child. Whenever I complained about the lack of food in the house, or the electricity getting turned off, or the holes in my shoes, they spouted off about societal expectations and the importance of being free spirits. But really it just meant to get high and to embrace bad parenting. Whoa, this was Jordan Prescott's childhood. He'd been a free-range hippie kid. It was hard to imagine. He just seemed so grounded and set in his ways. She had so many questions, she didn't even know where to begin. That's so fascinating, she said, meaning it. Fascinating? Jordan let out a huff of laughter. That's putting a spin on it. Kat bit her bottom lip. I just mean people's relationships and their parents' family dynamics and all that. I always found it interesting. What about you? He asked. She gripped the fork lightly and moved around on her plate. Usually she just gave people that old song and dance made-up story about her parents in L.A. and no siblings, a boring suburban life. Page 167. And for some reason, she didn't want to lie to Jordan. She took another bite of her casserole to buy some time. Let's see, maybe she could just steer the conversation back into easy territory. I think that my favorite dish growing up was grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. The cheaper the better. Not a lie. Really? The sheer amusement on Jordan's face made her feel like a soap bubble floating on the breeze on a warm summer day. Yep, she grinned, relaxing back in her chair. Cheap American cheese, soft white bread, and Campbell's soup from a can. Sublime. Fancy, he teased. Were your parents chefs? She lifted her glass and shrugged. I have no idea. My mom died when I was a baby, and I never knew my dad. Kat casually took a sip of water, then almost choked when she realized what she said. She had to force herself to swallow, breathe normal, because people breathed. That was a normal thing to do. What had made her tell him that? She never blurted that out about her past before. I'm so sorry to hear that, he said quietly. His expression was filled with compassion, and it settled over her shoulders, heavy and uncomfortable, like a blanket of scratchy wool. She'd seen that look on other people before, and she didn't like it. She didn't need the pity. She was totally fine. He seemed to be waiting for her to elaborate, but she wasn't going to. Suddenly felt very tired. Kat scraped her chair back. It's getting late. I should go. Okay. On page 177. Let's all get together at O'Malley's pub on Friday night. Gertie and Molly are going to be there. Kat, you want to come? Sure, Kat said. Gertie and Molly were Emma and Juliet's friends who worked at the local hair salon, and they were always vivacious and full of chatter. It had been a long time since Kat had gone out just for fun, mostly because she was broke, but Friday was payday, so she'd have money, and for the first time in what felt like ages. Good. Juliet slapped the dust from her broomstick skirt. I now have to go. Logan's parents are flying in from Florida to meet me. Ever since they told them that we were engaged, they've been riddling him with questions about me. Now they're coming out, and there's nothing I can do, page 178, except a light few of those peace and acceptance candles, and I make and hope for the best. Emma placed a hand on Juliet's shoulder. You're not going to need those candles. They're going to love you, Kat murmured in her agreement, unable to imagine anyone not loving these women. They were so open, generous, and kind. They were special, and not just because they both had a gift like her. They were unusual because they accepted her completely and without judgment. Even if Kat never found out who her parents were, she would always be grateful for Emma and Juliet's friendship. It was dark by the time Kat pulled into Willowbrook Lavender Farm. Jordan's truck was parked on the other side of the yard. Just thinking about him made heat rise up in the back of her neck and her limbs go weak. She wasn't sure it was possible to pretend things were normal between them, but she had to try. Luckily, it was too late to run into him. She hopped out of the car and set Hank on the grass. He immediately took off to see Waffles. Kat leaned against the garage and looked up at the stars. It was dark outside except for a single floodlight near the animal pen. A fluttering sound came up from overhead, and she held her hand out, instinctively knowing that her friend was close by. Edgar the Crow landed on the outstretched hand, carefully wrapping his talons around her wrist. "And where have you been?" Kat asked in a soft voice. "I haven't seen you in a while." Edgar tilted his head and rose into the air, and then settled on her shoulder, rubbed his head against her cheek. She reached up to pet him, grateful for his presence. Making her way across the grass, she came to a stop at the fence where Hank was snuffling around the ground beside the sleepy donkey. "You guys are family," Kat whispered. Edgar pressed his head to her cheek one more time, then disappeared into the night sky. She may not have a family like Juliet and Emma, but she had her animals, and that was more than enough. It had to be. That was page 179. Okay. Page 184. 185, 186, 187, all the way to 191 it looks like. "How do you know?" Jordan asked. "I just know." She straightened, filled the sudden desire to tell him the truth. "Animals and I have an understanding. Jordan hooked his thumbs into his pockets of his jeans. "What do you mean?" Kat gathered her courage. Would he believe her? Would he laugh and think she was ridiculous? Only one way to find out. "I know how she's feeling, and I can communicate my feelings to her. It's hard to explain." She watched him carefully, trying to gauge his reaction. "It's just the way it's always been." He looked at her with equal parts humor and skepticism. "Are you telling me that you can somehow magically talk to animals and that they can talk to you?" Kat took a deep breath and let it out fast, displacing a wisp of her hair and fallen eyes. How did she even begin to explain it? "I mean, yeah, that's pretty much it. Call it magic if you want. There sure as hell isn't any other explanation for it. Nothing I have been able to come up with." "All right," Jordan's voice said, tinged with amusement. He jerked his chin up and challenged, "Prove it." Kat crossed her arms. "What do you want to see?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Order one of those animals to do something." "I don't just order them to do stuff," she said in exasperation. "They're individuals with their own feelings, but I can ask." His mouth curved up at a corner. "Let's see it, then." Edgar suddenly swooped down from the sky above her. His timing could not have been more perfect. Page 185. "Okay." Kat held out her hand dramatically. "Edgar, will you please come here?" The large black crow fluttered down, settling into her wrist. "How are you?" Kat asked him. Edgar crowed once. She turned to Jordan. "He's looking for snacks." If Jordan was surprised, he did a sure good job of hiding it. He ducked through the fence slats and walked over to them. "This is a pet crow you were telling me about?" "Not a pet, I told you." Kat smoothed Edgar's sleek black feathers. "He's a wild bird. Now, Edgar, Jordan here doesn't believe that we're friends. How are we going to prove it?" Edgar tilted his head and fixed Jordan with a beady eye. "I know," Kat said. "Why don't you wait here with him, and I'll go get my purse and get you a treat." Edgar called loudly, rose into the air, and landed on Kat's shoulder. "He's not sure that you're trustworthy," Kat said to Jordan. Frowning, Jordan watched Edgar inch closer to Kat's face, his long claws curving over her shoulder. "Is that safe?" She ignored him and said, "Edgar, if you want a treat, you need to let Jordan hold you. He'll be very gentle, I promise." Edgar shook his head. Jordan looked mildly surprised. Hold out your hand like this. Kat showed Jordan how to hold his hand straight out sideways so his fingers were straight. Now just ask him to come. Jordan laughed. Just ask. Kat nodded. Jordan sighed and held out his hand. Here, bird. Nothing happened. Kat rolled her eyes. You call that asking? Edgar tipped his head back and made a chuckling sound. Page 186. He's laughing at you, Kat told Jordan, but I'll accept that you are a work in progress. She turned to Edgar. Now, if you want that treat, I promise, you'll have to wait here with Jordan. He's a friend, too, even though he hasn't learned how to ask nicely. He won't hurt you. Edgar seemed to think it over for a few minutes. Then, in a flurry of feathers, he rose over her shoulder and settled onto Jordan's hand. Jordan let out a huff of surprise. Kat grinned and ran to fetch a snack from her purse. When she returned, Jordan and the bird were still sizing each other up. Here, Kat handed the cracker to Jordan. You can feed him. Jordan held it out, and Edgar took it quickly and then launched into the air. They watched him fly away until he was just a dark speck with a cerulean blue sky. Kat slapped the crumbs off her hands, grinning triumphantly at Jordan. How's that for proof? You do have a way with animals, he said. I'll give you that. She pursed her lips to one side. He still didn't seem convinced. She turned to Lulabelle, who was busy munching on a patch of tall grass near the fence. Lulabelle, will you please come here? The little goat raised her head reluctantly, still chewing on a weed. Jordan still doesn't think we can talk to each other. Can you go say hi to Jordan to help me prove it? She pointed to where Jordan was standing. Lulabelle bounded over to Jordan, did a quick circle around him, and butted her head against his leg, then went back to the grass and resumed eating. Jordan stared at the tiny goat, then Kat. He wasn't smiling any more. Page 187. Kat held Jordan's gaze and called, Waffles? The donkey poked out his head from the barn. Waffles, Jordan doesn't believe we can communicate. Can you come over and give him a nudge to help prove it? Waffles trotted over and nudged Jordan with his velvety nose. Then he did it again. Jordan stood there with his hand slightly raised, blinking down at the donkey. Now do you believe me? Kat asked, daring him to say something, anything, hoping he wouldn't say she was a freak. There was an odd expression on his face. That's crazy. Kat felt her heart sink. He was going to turn on her, treat her like a weirdo. That's what usually happened when she tried to reveal her connection with animals. At first she thought it was novel, a funny trick. They were fine with that idea of it until they saw it in action. Then it was just made them uncomfortable or scared. It's pretty fantastic, he continued, staring at her in amazement. It really is. Kat flushed with relief. Jordan was surprised, but there was no judgment or fear in his face. He admired her ability. You're pretty fantastic, Kat Davenport, he said quietly. Her skin tingled with pleasure. She waved a hand of self-consciousness. It's just a thing. Some people are really good at math or engineering, and I'm good with animals. Before he had a chance to say anything else, a sleek white sedan pulled to a stop in the driveway, and Layla Gentry emerged. She was wearing shiny black stiletto pumps, a black shift dress, and the same bright red lipstick. This time her brown hair was pulled into a low bun. She was the epitome of understated elegance. I'll talk to you later, okay? I have an appointment. Jordan walked over to greet Layla, and they strolled toward the house. Page 188. As they neared the porch, she placed a hand on Jordan's forearm and let out a throaty, melodious laugh. Kat scowled and kicked at the clump of dirt. Even the woman's laugh was fancy pants. She glanced down at herself. Her jeans, the t-shirt, were splattered with mud from the water spigot. When she fed the animals, she was pretty sure her hair was now a scrambled mess around her head. Whatever, it's not like it mattered. Nobody there was there to care. She took another peek at Jordan. He was now deep in conversation with the lovely Layla. Lulabelle butted Kat's leg. She glanced down and laughed. What's the matter? You're not getting enough attention? Without a second thought, she plopped down in the muddy grass and gave Lulabelle a hug. Waffles quickly trotted over because if hugs and attentions were happening, he needed to be on that. Pretty soon, Hank showed up for his fair share. Where's Lucky? Kat asked him. Hank gave a little whine. Apparently Lucky wasn't happy. Kat jumped up, slapping the dust off her jeans. Where is he? Hank started off towards the farmhouse, and Kat followed. When Hank reached the porch, he nosed underneath it and whined again. Layla and Jordan were sitting on the porch chairs. Kat knew that they were watching her, but she didn't have time to feel self-conscious. Lucky needed her, and that was more important. She gave them a cheery wave. Sorry, carry on. I'm just getting one of the animals. She crouched low and saw Lucky shivering underneath the porch. Hey there, she said softly. Want to come out and play with the others? Lucky looked away. Page 189. Kat scooted under the porch on her stomach. until they were face to face. "You don't need to hide here," she whispered, reaching out to gently pet him. "This place is safe." Lucky nudged her hand with his wet nose, but he wasn't convinced. She could feel the nervous energy pouring off him, so she did her best to calm him down. "I know all this is new, but everyone's so happy that you're here. You have friends now." She inched closer till she was able to snuggle up beside him. For a few minutes Cat continued to pet him until he stopped shivering. Even though he was calmer than before, he still seemed very jumpy. "How about this?" Cat said gently. "You come out from underneath the porch and I'll pick you up, carry you back to my apartment where it's safe. It'll be just me and you and Hank. How's that?" "What's going on down there?" Jordan called. Luckily startled and backed away. Cat heard footsteps on the porch above her. "Nothing," Cat said quickly. "I'm just talking to," maybe it wasn't such a good idea to say that she was talking to animals in front of Layla. "I'm just getting my dog." "Hank is right out here," Jordan said, coming up to stand behind her. Cat cringed. Now she was in for it. She glanced back and saw his work boots and a pair of spiky stilettos. Great, both of them were there to witness her awkward sprawl underneath the porch. At least Jordan had seen her scroungy before, but Layla's presence just made the moment a zillion times worse. Layla was like the original origami swan, all lovely and sleek and perfect pressed edges, and Cat felt like more like an origami boulder, a lumpy wadded piece of paper. "I wasn't talking about Hank," Cat said calmly as possible. "I was talking about my other dog." There was silence for a few seconds. She could just imagine Jordan processing this information and how he'd react. She held her breath. "What other dog?" Jordan's tone was deceptively mild. She exhaled fast. Now was as good a time as any. "My dog Lucky, the one I rescued." Cat looked at Lucky and said very low, "I'll be right back." Page 190. She shimmied out backward on her stomach, fully aware of how much she appeared to Jordan and Layla. Her jeans were filthy from sitting in the animal pen, her t-shirt rode up to expose bare skin on her lower back, and her hair probably looked like a bright red tumbleweed. When she finally rolled out from underneath the porch, she was even muddier than she'd been before. "Origami boulder, ladies and gentlemen, here for your viewing pleasure." Jordan looked deeply suspicious. "Who's Lucky?" Layla's head was tilted in polite observation. "You remember," Cat bluffed. She latched onto Layla's presence like a shield. "The three-legged dog and nobody wanted. Remember I told you I was rescuing him because there was going to put him to sleep?" Jordan began shaking his head. "No." Cat nodded and then said, "You said it was a good idea and I should save him from such a sad fate because you couldn't imagine anyone doing that to a poor innocent animal." Layla's face softened and she turned to Jordan. She pressed her hand on his arm again. Why did she always have to do that? Like she was afraid if she didn't touch him he'd run away. "Oh, that is the sweetest thing I've heard all day. You were always the champion for others. You have such a good heart, Jordan Prescott." "He does," Cat said, eyed him carefully. "He really does." Jordan seemed to be searching for a way to respond. Cat held his gaze, daring him to contradict her. It wouldn't be wise, not with the lovely Layla so enamored with his good heart. Page 191. Jordan's mouth twitched. "Right," he finally said. "Do you need help with the poor innocent dog?" "Nope," Cat said brightly, beaming at both of him and Layla. "I've got it all under control. We'll only be a minute." When Jordan and Layla wandered back toward their car, Cat seized the moment. She ducked back under the porch and army crawled to Lucky. Then she used all of her good energy to coax him out. Once they were free of the porch, she gathered him up and called Hank, and they made their way to the apartment above the garage. When she reached the door, she glanced back at Jordan. Layla was still talking to him, but he was staring straight at Cat with a calculating look on his face. Clearly he wasn't finished with her. Yeah, well, maybe she wasn't finished with him either. She threw him a sassy grin, tossed her hair off her shoulder, and closed that apartment door. Okay. We're going to try and cover some major pages here. I want to get us to at least 250 tonight. This is page 211. "We found something in the attic you need to see," Emma finished, cheeks pink with excitement. Next to Juliet, Emma looked squeaky clean and sweet in a peach-colored sundress and white cardigan. Both women were stealing glances at Jordan like he was some rare exotic breed they'd never seen before. Cat quickly introduced them. Jordan was standing so close to her, their arms were touching, but he made no move to step away. It sparked a warm glow inside her that seemed to flicker and grow. "So you're Cat's new landlord," Emma mused, tilting her head thoughtfully. "Yes," he said with an easy smile. For now. The temporary nature of that doused the glow inside her like a splash of cold water. For the umpteenth time, Cat had to remind herself that Jordan wasn't sticking around. He wasn't going to be in the picture, not even at the edge of the frame. I think I've seen you at the farmer's market, Juliet said to him, stuffing her hands into her pockets and her overalls. Yeah, it's where I first met Kat, actually. Jordan gave Kat's elbow a playful nudge. She was doing some interesting work for the animal shelter. Kat groaned at the memory of that ridiculous chicken costume. I can't believe I missed that farmer's market that day, Juliet said, giggling. I'd paid to see good money for you in that costume. It was a nightmare fuel, Kat said, but be glad you were spared, and those feathers still haunt me. You were glorious. Jordan's voice was tinged with warmth and admiration. Kat rolled her eyes, trying to pretend his praise didn't affect her. We came to see if you wanted to come to lunch, Emma said. Kat glanced back at the tents. I'd love to, but I have to stay here and help with the crowd control. Juliet scrunched up her nose and peeked over Kat's shoulder. I don't see a crowd. Are you expecting a lot of people? Emma asked. There was only one person browsing at the puppy tent. I hope so, Kat said glumly, but we haven't had a huge advertising budget, so I'm not sure that will happen. Come over tonight then, Emma said. We have dinner and you in on the stuff we found. Kat glanced at Jordan. She really wanted to jump into some of that trouble he mentioned earlier, but she didn't want to turn down Emma and Juliet either. She loved the camaraderie they shared whenever they were all together, and she suddenly felt torn. You should go. Jordan placed a warm hand on her lower back. Rain check. Wait, Emma said. Did you guys already have plans? Not at all, he assured her. It was the truth, yet Kat felt a twinge of disappointment. Page 212. I've got to run, he said. It was good to meet you both. He flashed Juliet and Emma a devastating, handsome smile. Then he winked at Kat and took off across the lawn in a long, purposeful stride. She watched him go because it was impossible not to. The way he moved, all smooth, masculine grace, did warm and melty things to her insides. So, Juliet sang in a voice full of delightful innuendo, Mr. Mysterious seems to be rather taken with you. Page 213. Kat felt her face grow hot. We're just friends. Uh-huh, Kat teased. That's why you're blushing like my favorite champagne? She's right, Juliet. I saw the way that you looked at each other, and I think you two blew past the friend zone several miles back. Kat tried not to smile, but she just couldn't help herself. Is it that obvious? Clear as vodka shots, Juliet declared. Emma clapped her hands. So when did you start dating? We're not dating, Kate said quickly. What could she say? We're just kissing in the broom closet, making out in the open fields, and having hot and wild boom back in the Bohemian caverns. We're just hooking up, Emma said, grinning. Oh, Juliet's eyes widened in scandalized glee. Wait until the girls at the salon find out that he's taken. Hearts are going to be breaking all over this island. He's not taken, Kat insisted. I'm so proud of you, Juliet teased. Getting busy with Mr. Mysterious. She raised her hand for a high five. Kat left her hanging. That's not what this is, you guys. You make it sound like I'm a big floozy out there, all... She flapped her hands around, floozing it up. Of course you're not, Emma said kindly. And the reason we know this is because it's not the early 1900s, Juliet added. No one says floozy anymore. Old Mrs. Mahoney does, Emma declared, and that's what she calls French poodle who bothers her dog Bonbon. You know what? I like it, Juliet announced. Let's bring floozy back. I say we make it happen. Kat rolled her eyes. Are you guys done here? Juliet slung her arm around Kat and kissed her on the head, while Emma patted her on the back. We're just teasing you because we love you. The girls continued their usual chatter, but Kat rooted to the spot, stunned. Their kindness, their casual acceptance of her, almost overwhelming. They treated her as if she was a best friend or a sister. It made her wish more than anything that the connection to Juliet and Emma's family was real, even though she kept telling herself it couldn't possibly be true. A tiny voice inside her whispered, what if? That was page 214. Moving forward, 214, 15, to 15, 16, 17, 18, 19... Okay, 215. Well, I don't see where I marked 215, I'll be honest. Give me a minute. Okay. Well, we're going to start here anyway. When Kat returned home, the first thing she did was check on the butterflies. All 7 had emerged, and every time she saw them, she felt optimistic about the future. They were a constant reminder that change could be wonderful. After feeding them some sugar water, she walked over to the farmhouse kitchen and put a kettle on to the stove to boil and slumped into a chair exhausted. It had been a long day. She wanted nothing more than to crawl into bed and sleep for the next 48 hours. But since that wasn't going to get that before heading out to dinner with Emma's house tonight, a double hit of Earl Grey tea would have to do. The teapot whistled and she dragged herself over to the stove. Opal entered the kitchen wearing a pink house dress and terry cloth slippers. She was relying heavily on her cane today and moving slower than usual. "My dear, you look like you've been through a blender." Kat chuckled. "I'm beat, but we found homes for all 3 dogs, 2 cats, so it was worth it." Opal took a seat at the kitchen table. "Did you have a mad rush of people?" "Hardly." Kat pulled 2 cups from the cupboard, but was trying to facilitate good homes for pets in such a short amount of time drains the energy out of me. Opal tilted her head. "How so?" Page 216. "Sometimes people decide they want an animal, but it's not right for them, so I have to step in, and it's not always easy." Kat poured the tea and set one in front of Opal, then she sank into the chair opposite her. "For example, today a young woman wanted to adopt a cat of ours named Princess Leia. The woman already lived with 3 roommates, a large dog, and a parrot. Princess Leia would have been miserable. She needed a quiet home with no other animals." "Is that what her former owners told you?" Opal asked. "No." Kat hesitated. It would be so easy just to say yes, but she cared about Opal. She wanted to tell her the truth. "It's what the cat told me." "Really?" Opal lifted her teacup, completely unfazed. In her pastel house dress she looked fragile and unassuming, but Kat had a feeling the old woman was strong as tempered steel on the inside, where it counted the most. Would she be able to take the truth? Only one way to find out. Kat took a bracing sip of tea. "The thing is, Opal, I was born with the ability to understand how animals feel, and I can communicate with them. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. That's why I work so well with them." That makes sense," Opal said mildly. "You're not the first person I've heard of that ability." Kat sat up straighter. All her previous feelings of fatigue flew out the window. "Who else has it?" Opal's forehead wrinkled. "Well, now I can't remember exactly, but my friend Sam was close with those Holloway family way back before your time. He said that they had special talents, and I seem to remember one of them was a horse whisperer or some such thing." A bolt of hope struck through Kat like lightning. It was so sharp and pure that it almost hurt. She told herself for so long that she didn't need to know where she came from, because that tiny voice inside her whispered a little louder, "What if?" What if she truly did belong on this island? The intense desperation desire to figure out her roots rocked her through her. She'd forgotten what it felt like because she kept it buried for so long. "I'll have to ask Sam," Opal said. "He has a very good memory with these sort of things." "That would be nice." Kat concentrated on spooning a sugar into her tea and give herself something to do. She didn't want to show Opal how much her statement affected her. "So you communicate with animals," Opal said, like she just remarked on the weather. "And that's what you had to do today. So which is why you're so tired." "Yes, and the young woman who was very adamant about adopting Princess Leia. I had to explain that they wouldn't be compatible, and the woman got annoyed and demanded to speak with Smitty, my boss." Opal pursed her lips. "And what did Smitty say?" "She told the woman to forget it." Kat felt a rush of gratitude at that memory. Her exact words were, "If Kat says you're not compatible with that animal, then you're not compatible. End of story. Move along, chickadee." A wide grin stretched across Kat's face. Watching Smitty Bankston go to bat for her had been the greatest thing Kat had ever experienced since she began working at the Daisy Meadows Pet Rescue. As grumpy as Smitty was, she believed in Kat's talents, and that meant a lot. "Good for her," Opal said, beaming. "It sounds like you're in the right profession trying to find homes for those poor animals. It must be hard on you to see so many with no place to live." "It is," Kat said admittedly. "My whole life I've wished I could have a big enough place to house those animals." That was page 217, going to 218. "Who are unwanted, especially the needy ones, like Lucky and Lulabelle. Well, until that time comes," Opal said, reaching out her hand, "you bring them here." Kat's heart filled with warmth, but she knew it wouldn't be a real solution. "Thanks, but Jordan made it pretty clear he doesn't want more animals roaming around, and I know he's trying to fix his place up to sell it." "So he says," Opal said smugly, "but I do wonder." Kat gripped her teacup with both hands. "What do you mean?" "I've watched that boy grow up, and I know his parents were irresponsible. He didn't have the easiest time of it, but he just seems genuinely happier here now as the days go by. You should have seen him when he first arrived, all sharp edges and clipped words and slick back hair. He roamed around the place like a caged tiger, restless and broody. But the longer he stays here, the more he does, sorting and cleaning, fixing up the farm, the more relaxed and comfortable he seems. I just can't help but feel like this is where he belongs." Kat wanted to be so badly for that to be true, but she took a sip of the tea, letting the sharp, bright taste of Bearmont ground her. Yes, she liked Jordan a lot, more than a lot. Every time she thought of him, her heart felt lighter. But she had to stay focused and stick to her plan. She just couldn't afford to get carried away, hoping for things that were beyond her control. The clock on the wall chimed, and Kat suddenly remembered her plans with Emma and Juliet. She rose from the table, Opal, an apologetic smile. I wish I could stay, but I promised my friends I'd meet them for dinner. Opal set down her teacup. First, I have a favor to ask. Next Saturday, the seniors are hosting the annual Summer End Charity Gala at the Country Club. It's a black tie affair and a great big hoop-baloo. Her hands began to flutter with excitement. There'll be live music and dancing, and all proceeds go to help fund our future activities. I want you to come. A black tie affair? Kat glanced down at the thrift store sandals. It sounds so wonderful, but unfortunately I just don't have the clothes for something that fancy. Maybe another time. It's still a week away, Opal reasoned. A pretty girl like you should have no problem finding something to wear. You look lovely in everything. If you change your mind, I'd be so proud to introduce you to my friends. Kat thanked her and promised to give it some thought, even though she already knew it was out of the question. She highly doubted she'd make Opal proud if she showed up in shorts and a tank top or a tie-dye sundress. Still, Kat felt a warm glow of happiness that Opal had thought to invite her. The more Kat got to know Opal, the more she liked her. How could Jordan want to leave when he had a grandmother like her? If Opal was her grandmother, Kat would hang on tight and never let go. But then she always observed that people who had a family usually didn't recognize how precious it was until it was gone. And that's page 218, 219. Okay. Remember, I'm going to try to push to go to 250. So here's 224, 225, and 226. Kat grasped his wife was a teenager in Emma's Juliet's family album. This must be your great aunt. She handed the newspaper clipping to them, continued sifting through the rest of the postcards. One showed a beach scene with a short message on the back. Kat read aloud, "We're here on the coast for a few weeks, darling. Evangeline has grown like a weed. She's wild and free and full of wanderlust, I'm afraid. Hugs and kisses, Caroline." Kat glanced up from the postcard and said, "Darling Evangeline?" The name seemed to echo off the walls. A soft gust of wind swirled through the attic surrounding the three of them, stirring their hair and kissing their eyelashes. It was typical summer breeze, except no windows in the attic were open. Kat shivered. Emma and Juliet were staring at her wide-eyed, and no one said anything. Kat was suddenly aware of the deep silence that surrounded them. It was so quiet, she felt as though a house was holding its breath. "Evangeline," she whispered. "Could that be her mother?" She started rummaging through the box in earnest. The last postcard was from Ireland, written in the same loop script as before. Kat read, "We've retired to home in Ireland. Evangeline left us a year ago to follow her own path. She goes wherever the wind blows her, but such is the way of things in our family, is it not? Still, a mother's heart will always yearn for her child. Live well, dearest sister. Hugs and kisses, Caroline." A hollow ache settled inside Kat. There was such a melancholy sense of finality to that last postcard. She cleared her throat. "Whatever happened to Evangeline?" Juliet took the postcard from her and studied it. "We don't know yet, but we're going to do everything we can to find out." "Is there anything else?" Emma asked, pointing to the steamer trunk. Kat reached to the drawer one last time. It was a sapphire blue gown. She tried it on before. She clutched it in surprise. "Did you guys put this in here?" "No," Juliet said. "Sometimes things just show up in odd places," Emma explained. "It's the house." Kat slid a hand over the luxurious velvet gown, marveling at everything they discovered. She placed the dress carefully back in the box, along with the other objects. Her mind was spinning out. She suddenly overcome with an equal mixture of frustration and elation. "This is driving me crazy," she said with a shaky voice. "What if we never find this out for sure?" Juliet laid a hand on Kat's shoulder. "Don't you worry. The house already knows you're part of this family, and we'll figure it out." "We will," Emma said gently. "Trust us. In the meantime," she stood stretched, "I think we all need food. The lasagna should be ready in half an hour. Let's go downstairs and discuss what we found over tea and cupcakes." "Dessert before dinner?" Kat asked with a lightness and she didn't feel. "That's my kind of plan." As they headed downstairs, Kat considered the possibility of what they just discovered. Could Evangeline be her mother? There was such an uncertainty surrounding it. She had to shove down the feeling of desperate hope that kept bubbling up. The only thing she knew for sure was that she now felt more connected with Emma and Juliet than ever, and if they could never prove that they were related, Kat didn't care. To her, Emma and Juliet already felt like family. Okay. 2:28, 2:29, and 2:30. He saw her, and his face lit up. "There you are!" She grinned like a fool. "Here I am." He sauntered over, noticing the butterfly cage. "Setting them free? I am. You're just in time," she said, unzipping the mesh cage. The brilliant orange and black butterflies floated out into the breeze, spreading their wings to land on a flowering shrub. Kat watched them with deep sense of contentment, knowing this was where they belonged. She sighed. "Home sweet home." "It's pretty amazing. They are, aren't they?" "I meant you." Jordan turned to her, face her. "You're amazing. The way you help things find homes." A blissful warmth spread through her body. Jordan's unexpected praise made her feel like she'd swallowed the sun. Kat knew she was blushing, but she couldn't help it. "I mean it," he said. "Not a lot of people have patience or desire to care for others the way you do." The way he looked at her with so much warmth and admiration almost was too much. Kat had to look away before she did something foolish, just like jump his bones. He was standing so close she wouldn't even have to jump very far. "Come to lunch with me," he said suddenly. She laughed. "I already ate lunch. It's almost 3 o'clock. Dinner then. Afternoon tea. Hell, I don't care." He reached out and hooked a finger in her pockets of her jeans, gently pulling her closer. "Just come with me." Kat's breath hitched. "Where?" "Anywhere," he murmured. She felt a swooping sensation in the pit of her stomach, like she was falling, and there was nothing to hold on to, and she didn't even care. Jordan Prescott was all too alluring for his own good. With his pirate smile, the wild hair, and intoxicating whiskey-colored eyes, just one glance and she could go from stone-cold sober to drunk on him in 3 seconds flat. Did he even have the idea how much his nearness affected her, especially now that she knew how good it could be between them? She bit her bottom lip and tried to sound casual. "I was just heading back to my apartment to change out of these clothes." "Good idea," he said. "Let's go." "Yes, let's," the queen of impulsive decisions cried. Kat tried to remember all the reasons she shouldn't get involved with him. She could have told him she'd meet him later, but she could have reminded him that her apartment was private space. It wasn't too late to try and keep her distance, but after that night she had at the Holloway house, Kat wasn't in the mood to be cautious anymore. Who knew what the future held? One day you could be all alone, and the next you could find out that you're related to a family of magical women. Life was unpredictable. Maybe she should just enjoy each moment while she could and quit worrying too much about what came next. That's page 230. Moving on. Okay. We're going to get a lot of this taken out tonight. I'm glad. 234, 235, 236 and 7. 238 and 39. 240 and 241. Good gravy. 242, 243. Good. His golden eye lit with interest. Why? Was it like, what was it like? Kat shrugged it off. Nothing worth talking about. She began rubbing her feet together, then forced herself to stop. "I have a question for you." "You do that a lot." He took her hands and linked their fingers together. "Do what?" "Change the subject to avoid talking about your past." Kat ignored him, tracing the tip of her tongue across the silvery scar on his left cheekbone. "How did you get that scar?" "Running with scissors," he said smoothly. Kat got the feeling that he used that explanation a lot. He took her hand and kissed the open palm, and then dipped his head back to nuzzle her neck. She shivered in delicious anticipation as he brushed a kiss on her bare shoulder. She pulled away, though it wasn't easy. "How did you really get it?" Jordan rolled onto his back with a sigh. Several moments passed in silence, and Kat started to think he wasn't going to answer. Could she blame him? She never talked about her past either. "I got into a fight in high school with a kid named Sebastian Harrington and some of his buddies," Jordan finally said. "It was me against the 4 of them, and I was winning until Sebastian shoved me backward and I fell against a broken chain link fence. Sliced my face to the bone. The principal came rushing out, broke things up, and I got suspended." Kat frowned. "Just you and nobody else?" He stared up at the ceiling like he was a million miles away. "By the time the principal came out, Sebastian's buddies had run off. He couldn't run because I had my fist in his hair. I was the one bleeding, but it didn't matter. Sebastian's parents were on the board and donated a lot of money to the school, so he was pretty much a golden child on campus. I, on the other hand, was a scrappy kid from the wrong side of the tracks with no support network. It was just easier for them to pin it on me and call it a day." Kat laid a hand on his chest. "Why were you fighting?" A muscle clenched in his jaw. Sebastian was harassing a younger girl who was poor, making fun of her shoes, laughing at her hand-me-down backpack. Then his buddies took her backpack and threw it in the garbage, saying it belonged there. Saying she belonged there. She looked like she was trying so hard not to cry, and Sebastian just stood there in his fancy clothes with his trust fund smirk on his face. That's awful, Kat said. Grew up in hand-me-down clothes, and she knew what it was like to be the butt end of other people's jokes. So you figured his face needed punching? Jordan smiled. At first, I just shoved him away and retrieved her backpack. I may have also made some comments about Sebastian's lack of masculinity because he felt the need to pick on a vulnerable girl. Jordan paused for a long moment. Then things just got ugly. He came at me from behind, kicking and punching, yelling that I was in no position to play the hero because I was just a trashy mutt with drugged-up hippie parents, and he said I should be embarrassed to be alive because nobody cared whether I lived or died, not even them. Kat felt a sharp, painful ache in her chest, for the boy had been. And then you punched him. Yeah, and then I punched him. He gave a self-deprecating laugh, and his buddies joined in to help take me down. It was good of you to champion that girl, Kat said. She wasn't strong like you. The tension in Jordan's face eased. Layla's a powerful house now, though. Layla of the fancy shoes? Kat asked in surprise. It was hard to imagine her as a poor little hand-me-down girl. Jordan smiled. We've known each other for a long time. We even dated for a brief time in high school. Jealousy reared its ugly head, but Kat refused to look at it in the eye. Everyone had a past, and it was normal for Jordan to have had relationships with other women. It was high school, for God's sakes. What was wrong with her anyway? She shouldn't even care. Layla had it tough at home. We both dead set on changing our lives the moment we got the chance. I did it by going off to college, and she started her own business. She's now a successful real estate agent. His tone grew lighter, and Kat could tell that he was happy for Layla. She has a house by the water now, which was her dream. As much as Kat wanted to dislike her, she just couldn't. She was glad Layla ended up successful. It wasn't easy to begin with. What happened to Sebastian? He moved away during our senior year because of his dad's job. We never saw him again. Well, I'm glad your story has a happy ending. Jordan laughed. That one always does anyway. So you and Layla, huh? She asked with a lightness she didn't feel. We're just friends. Jordan gave her a brief squeeze. The brief thing that we had years ago was exactly that. Years ago. We weren't even together for very long before we realized we didn't have much in common. She was just helping me out, put the house on the market when it's ready. Is it ready? Kat's heart suddenly began thumping hard against her rib cage. You're going to have to give me some notice, right? I mean, if you're going to sell the place, I needed to look for a new apartment. She worked hard for her to appear nonchalant because she didn't want Jordan to know just how attached she'd become to the farm. It wasn't just the beauty of the place, it was the animals and the people that came with it. The people who fit so seamlessly into her life. She began to weave there. Opal, Jordan, especially Jordan. Oh, crap. She was falling, wasn't she? Now what? The queen of impulsive decisions let out a tinkling laugh. No use trying to play your course now, sugar. This train has left the station, so buckle up and try to enjoy it. Kat took a shaky breath. Try to enjoy it. She could do that. Who knew what would happen? Maybe a bunch of miracles were in store and things would work out for her. Yeah, because stuff like that happened all the time. She bit the inside of her cheek and fiddled the corner of the quilt. Jordan shifted onto the side of his face. On his side to face her. His expression was very serious. It's not ready to sell yet, Kat. I still have some work to do, and the red barn needs to be cleared of all junk, so it'll be a while. Kat nodded. A while was good. She could live with that. What about you? Jordan nudged his foot with his. Tell me your story. My story? Kat noticed a loose thread on the quilt and then started working with it with her fingernail. I came here several weeks ago. No, I don't mean what you're doing here. I mean before. He fixed her with a steady gaze. Where did you grow up? She continued pulling at the thread until he laid a warm hand on hers. California, she said, steeling herself. My mother died when I was a baby, and I had no other relatives, so I went into the system. Foster homes. There, she said it. And it wasn't even hard. She waited for a usual prick of shame that came with telling, that ever-present feeling of being, quote, less than, unquote, other people, but this time it didn't come. Maybe it was because she knew he had a difficult childhood too. Telling him had been much easier than telling other people, which was strange. He was just so easy to talk to. Jordan was quiet for a while, which was a relief. The usual pity of surprise wasn't there on his face, which she half expected. He just seemed accepting, and that was what it was like, he asked softly. Kat gave him a look. What do you mean what it was like? It was foster care, foster homes, some better than others, none of them great. But I thought babies usually got adopted by couples. At least that's how it always worked. Kat scoffed. Maybe that's how it worked on TV. In real life, there was no guarantees. There certainly hadn't been for her. The system doesn't always work that way. It might be if you're very lucky and if you're a normal kid, but when you don't bond with people and you talk to animals, not ideal circumstances. Jordan sat up to lean against the headboard. What happened? Kat pulled the quilt around her. I was very young when I was placed in what was supposed to be a permanent home. I think the couple genuinely wanted me, and it might have worked out, except, she trailed off, she barely remembered any of it, except for what that she was told later by the social workers. By the time I was 4, I started to show signs of my affinity toward animals, and it bothered them. Bothered them how? Jordan asked. I mean, you were just a kid, a tiny kid with the ability to communicate with a family dog. So I never spoke to them. Mostly I spoke to the dog, and they thought that there was something wrong with my brain. So they put me in child therapy until I was in the 1st grade. Had a standing weekly appointment, and every Tuesday night when my foster mom went off to book her book club, I went off to bed. My foster dad had a weekly appointment of his own. He had an affair with Millie, the next door lady. So what happened? I told my foster mom all about it. Kat said with a shrug. I was too young to know any better, and I was only relaying what I understood from the dog. I kept telling her that Millie came over on Tuesday nights to put Dad to bed. Anyway, it all went downhill from there. My foster mom freaked out. They fought all the time after that. They used to argue about what to do with me sometimes, but then they separated and I was put back into another home. Jordan took her hand. He didn't say anything, but he didn't have to. It was comforting just to have him there, listening to her without judgment, and it was so easy to talk to him. Kat had never felt this way around anyone. My last memory of them was the dog whining on the porch when I left, she continued. I think I missed him the most. There was something wrong with me. I communicated better with animals than with my own foster parents. No wonder they thought that I was broken. It wasn't until later that I started connecting more with people, but even when that was hard, because by then I learned not to get attached, that things could change at any moment, and most of it was beyond my control. Animals were a great comfort to me, but I couldn't really share that part of myself when I was younger. I learned to pretend that it didn't exist because I needed to fit in. Nobody wants a freak show. He squeezed her hand. Don't say that. Kat glanced at him from beneath her lashes. You have to admit it's kind of freaky. No, he said firmly. I was surprised when you first showed me how you talked to that crow and the other animals, but it's not freaky, it's cool. My mom used to believe in all those Holloway magic, so why the hell not? He said like it was no big deal, and his acceptance warmed her in all the right places. Where are your parents? Kat asked. He shook his head. They went to join a hippie commune in Malaysia, last I heard. Wow, talk about leaving it all behind. It seemed like impossible to contemplate. Even though Kat hadn't been there that long, Willowbrook Lavender Farms was the best place she'd ever lived. She couldn't imagine wanting to abandon it. When did you see them last? The day I left for college, so 13 years ago, give or take. Kat stared at him, but his expression was hard to read. She drew her knees up and hugged them to her chest and under the blanket, wondering how his parents could be okay with that. Wouldn't they want to know their son to be in his life? Aren't they happy there? Jordan gave a hollow laugh. The last message I got from my mom was to tell me that they loved it, and they were never coming back. They mortgaged this place to the hilt. I think the money just ran out, so they split. They were going to let the bank foreclose on it right underneath my grandmother. So yes, I think moving to Malaysia appealed to their, quote, free-spirited, end quote, ideals. No bills to worry about, nobody to take care of except themselves. If they were a tiny edge of bitterness to his voice, Kat couldn't blame him. Jordan had to grow up fending for himself, and he'd just become an amazing person. And all that tragedy of it was his parents would never know just how amazing he was. They were quiet for a long time, but it was comfortable silence. He wrapped an arm around her and drew her closer. She leaned her head on his chest, listening to a steady thump of his heart. Thank you, Kat said before she could stop herself, for what you said earlier about my animal magic. I'm glad you don't think I'm a wackadoo. His chest shook with silent laughter, and he tightened his grip around her. Believe me, Kat, I grew up with a wackadoo. You're nothing like that. You're perfect. Her face flushed with the heat of unexpected praise. Them and Juliet seem to think that I'm related to them, but I have no idea. We're trying to track down who my mother was, and they think they found a lead in one of their relatives. He looked genuinely pleased. That's great. Kat felt a twinge of anxiety. It's only great if it's true. What if it's not? What if they think I'm related and then I turn out to be just Kat? just Kat by herself like before, like always, she trailed off. Would that be so bad? Jordan asked gently. Yes, she frowned. I mean, no, I don't know. Look, he shifted his face to hers. If it turns out that your mom was a Holloway, great. Then you'll know where you're related to your friends. But if it turns out you're not, he shrugged, it doesn't matter. How can you say that? She rubbed her feet together underneath the covers. Family matters more than anything. No one knows that better than a person without one. But you're still you, regardless of who they are. Kat squeezed her eyes shut. He didn't get it. Listen to me, Jordan said fiercely. You can make your family. Kat had the sudden feeling that he wasn't only talking about her. Not everyone gets the right start, but you can learn and you can grow and you can learn and to gather the people around you who you can trust, the people who support you and lift you up, the people who you can rely on. That's the family that matters. Is that what you did? Kat asked, searching his face. Is that why you always wanted to go back to New York? Because you always have the people you trust, and that's a life that gave you everything you wanted? She didn't want him to go, but she wasn't going to fault him if that's really what he had back there, to find true happiness and be living the life you've always dreamed about. That must be something. Jordan ran a hand over his face and glanced away. I have a pretty sweet deal going on back there, a great place, a successful business, absolutely no family drama. It truly is the city that never sleeps. There's always something going on, things to see and do. It's never quiet like it is here. That sounds like fun. For you. She already done the party scene in California, and she knew it wasn't for her. It is fun, he said earnestly. You can never get bored there. Kat smiled. When you surround yourself with needy animals, trust me, boredom doesn't often factor in. You should visit me in New York, he said suddenly. Maybe, except she was pretty sure that she never would. New York was nice, but she wouldn't be visiting him there. It would just be too hard. She already knew she was going to be hurt when he left. With a heavy sigh, Kat ran her hands through her hair, massaging her scalp. What's the matter? Jordan asked. Nothing, she searched for a diversion. Except I'm starving, you know. What we need, chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream. The really good kind, where you can taste the grainy brown sugar in the cookie dough, you know, with the extra large cookie chunks mixed in. The idea was almost enough to distract her from sobering thought of Jordan going back to New York City. No thanks, I've got my favorite dessert right here. He leaned over and kissed her. Besides, I need real food. Let's order pizza. I'm too lazy to get out of bed. He yawned and stretched his arms up, drawing his attention to the defined muscles of his shoulders and biceps. You don't look lazy. Kat was momentarily riveted by the way his ab muscles flexed and bunched when he stretched. Not with all that going on. She waved her hand into his torso and his arms. A wicked smile. You make me sound lazy. I should be out there working, but for some reason I get around you and all I want to do is fall into bed. He gripped the edges of the quilt and yanked it away. Then he lunged for her, wrapping his arms around her in a bear hug, tickling her ribs with his fingertips. Kat giggled and laughed, then all out shrieked, squirming under him until all their humor evaporated into something far more delicious and satisfying than the best cookie dough ice cream ever. Okay, 2:49. We're getting close. 2:49, 2:50. All my grandmother ever said she was that the house knew a lot of things better than we did. We certainly never learned anything about the keys and hidden locks. Juliet groaned and rubbed her face. All I remember was her telling us to wash our hands before dinner and not to play in the road and always stick together. And support each other, Emma said softly. Grams was all good about that stuff like that. Good at reminding us that we were special, Juliet said wistfully, and that being special was a good thing. Kat felt a sudden sense of melancholy, like she lost out on knowing a woman like Emma and Juliet remembered fondly. She wondered what it would be like to have someone in her corner like that growing up. Sounds like she was an amazing person. She really was. Emma pushed to her feet. I think she would have loved you. Juliet stood and slapped her hands together. Let's call it a day. This has been good progress, people. We can try again tomorrow. Maybe look through this attic again. There has to be something we're missing. By the time they made their way back into the house, the lights were on and the pizza delivery car was just pulling into the driveway. For the rest of the evening, they rehashed what they found and discussing possibilities over bites of cheesy pizza and frozen margaritas and occasional input from the house. Every once in a while, the clover key would appear. Once Juliet opened a kitchen drawer for the napkins, and again Emma reached for her hands to the popcorn bowl. Later, when Kat was putting on her shoes to leave, the key showed up in her left toe of her boot. Okay, this key is very persistent, Kat said, as she set it on the hall table. It's the house. Emma blew a curl off her forehead, tilted her face to the ceiling. Give it a rest, okay? We're doing the best we can. As Kat turned to leave, she could have swore the house settled in a humph. Well, we're going to do page 266. Hope this doesn't bring me bad luck. Emma suddenly gasped that she jumped up and whirled in to face them. We have to get back to the house. I think I know how to open the lock. Jordan set the guitar aside. How? Emma frowned, fiercely determined. Together. After the women dashed back to the house, Jordan sat on the porch with the guitar, absently strumming the melody. Something warm and sweet, was too powerful to name, flooded through him when he thought of Kat's beautiful face and how it glowed with hope as she thanked him before they left. He wanted to see her light up like that every day. He wanted all of sorts of reasons. For a long time he stayed on the porch, his mind spinning with thoughts of Kat and how happy he could make her. Okay, now why did I... Okay, we're going to keep going for a little bit. Not much longer, though, because I'm getting really tired. Page 267. Back at the Holloway house, Kat followed Emma and Juliet down the root cellar. Three of them knelt beside the lock. Emma withdrew the clover key from her pocket. I think we're meant to do this together. You mean like hold the key together? Juliet asked. It can't be that simple. Let's try it. Kat reached out and laid her hand on Emma's. Juliet did the same, and Emma inserted the key into the lock and a loud click. Kat's hand began to buzz with a strange tingling energy. A cool breeze swirled into the room, surrounding all three of them. It kissed Kat's eyelashes and ruffled her hair at the nape of the neck. She thought she heard whispers in the air around them. Do you feel that? Juliet's face glowed with triumph. Yes, Emma breathed. She turned to Kat. That's Holloway magic. Kat stared at the lock, wondering what she was about to happen. Whatever it was, she had a feeling her life was about to change in a huge way. They left the north and traveled south, Emma whispered in the lyrics as they turned the key south. Another clicking sound in the mechanism. They all exchanged excited glances. Then west across the sea, Juliet said. They turned the key to the west, and this time the click sounded like a chime of a grandfather clock. Together is the answer, Kat whispered. The lock sprang free, revealing a wooden box carved with flowers, vines, and a strange Celtic-looking symbol. It was long and narrow, and with a fitted lid. Okay, this is going to take us to page 269. Juliet opened the lid to reveal a rolled-up piece of parchment. Emma pulled it out, and Kat helped her unroll it. The paper was surprisingly sturdy, considering how old it looked, and comforting. The scent of sweet herbs, spices seemed to waft in the air around them. They all peered down at the faded words. It's a spell, Juliet breathed. Hearth and home, Emma read aloud, to create a true home, a sentinel to guide and protect. A sentinel, Kat repeated, like this house? Yes, Emma scanned the words quickly. I think this spell only works if the three of us do it together. It's for making a home that recognizes and protects our family. Wow, Juliet said in awe. And to think it's been here all along. Why were we just finding it now? Emma slowly turned and looked at Kat. I think it was waiting for the right Holloway to arrive. Back in the kitchen, Emma put on the kettle while Kat poured over the hearth and home spell on the marble island. Her head ached with monumental significance of what they just discovered. So let me get this straight, Juliet said between bites of white chocolate macadamia nut cookie. That spell is from our ancestors, but it could only be discovered and used when the three Holloways were present? Yes, Emma said, putting all the 3 teacups in front of the cupboard. And once Kat came along, I guess it was finally ready to be found. So whenever we're ready, it looks like we can bring up the spirit of this house into both of your homes, too, a sentinel guide to protect. The lights flickered joyfully, and all 3 women laughed. Kat shook her head, still floored by the newfound proof that she was part of the Holloway family. I wish I knew for sure how I fit into all this. We'll figure it out, Emma assured her, but we don't need more proof. You belong with us. So we now know that Kat is indeed a Holloway. Okay. We're going to stop there for tonight. We don't have much left to go. I feel confident in that. And I would say that we will conquer a rating as well tomorrow for this book. So that's good. Then we have 2 other books that's already waiting to be done in a book review. So that's even better. So that's good news. It is now 1:33. And I got to get to bed early because I've got to get up early. So I'm not going to be watching any movie tonight. I'm going to go brush teeth and go to bed. That's how thrilling a Friday I have. Oh, well. More housework and cooking tomorrow, but I get to see a lot of people tomorrow, so that'll be great. Yeehaw. Love y'all. Stay safe, wash your hands, keep your social distance, wear a mask. God bless.